All right, let's call this meeting to order. It is 7 o'clock. Roll call. Let's show that we have all of the voting commissioners here, either present or on the phone, and
I think we're directors.
Director Bailey is not here for ACC. He has an excused absence. All right, adoption of agenda. Let's go through the agenda and see if there's anything that we want to change or delete or anything like that.
I have one thing, if we could, since we have Director Holmstrom here by phone and she's on my phone with a low battery, I'd like to see if we can move this, the item about the 2020 budget discussion to the very front so that we make every accommodation we can.
Okay, that's item 10B, the budget discussion. Let's move that up right to the front, and we'll start that right after the adoption of the agenda. All right? Is there any objection to that?
Nope.
Any other changes? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted as amended. Okay, so that means our first discussion is the agenda. And at this point, I think that we need to understand that there are several different points of view on the agenda. And we have had lots of emails from lots of different opinions that we need to take all of them into account, not just one side. Is there anybody who would like to start this off by making a motion? I'm hearing nothing.
Please.
Do we hear a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to amend our budget proposal to be a 7% increase from 2019.
Okay, can somebody please repeat that so that we do understand what that is? If it's a motion to amend, is that? I didn't
Amend
understand.
budget proposal so that it reflects a strictly 7% increase. from
Okay,
last
that
year.
is to amend our budget proposal to adjust to a 7% increase. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we do have a second. All right, shall we start discussion? Larry, could you get close to the microphone, please?
I'd like to point out that the dollars collected under such a proposal would be virtually identical to the dollars proposed already, and that by changing this and requiring an additional mailing, one would create unnecessary confusion and a great deal of unnecessary expense.
Further discussion? Carol?
Well, I hear a 7% increase. I don't hear about anything going for SURF. I guess I'd feel that if we had to really take it down to 7% without a special assessment to cover the capital items, then we aren't funding our budget.
Pardon me for being unclear. That was
Okay.
my point.
I'm sorry. Go
So
ahead.
the budget that has been adopted requires a certain amount of dues or revenue from dues and special assessment in order to fund it. So if we're only taking it back to 7% of the dues, it isn't going to fund the budget. So how do you propose that we adjust the budget accordingly?
Is there a suggestion? Question?
I'll make a comment on there
Good.
further.
Larry?
As I sent to all board members, and I would be very surprised if it didn't get circulated more widely, the RCWs explicitly say that we are required, we must include in our budget every penny we expect to incur in costs. That determination has already been made. It's been assessed by the Finance Committee with the assistance of staff. It's been adopted by this board already. We know what we need. Anything less than that by $1 is in violation of the RCWs.
Eric?
I'd like to point out one procedural hurdle that timeline-wise, that we are bound by state law to conform with, and that is after the budget is adopted by the board, which happened on the 29th of last month.
Yes.
The board adopted the 2020 budget. There is a 30-day period between that day and the day that the ballots to vote on that budget for ratification in November have to be in people's, getting into people's mailboxes. That means that if we were to amend the budget that we voted on a month ago, that we would suddenly be out of compliance with the timeline because people would be voting on something in their hands that was not what I'm hearing that we're trying to change things to. So we simply cannot amend the budget.
Andrew?
So I'm just, as a board member, I'm seeing 84% of the community voting in favor of the petition. And from our legal advice, our legal counsel, he said that, back in June, that if the amendment does pass, then as I said, it is incorporated into the bylaws. So it is a bylaw as of today, which means our proposed budget as a board does not conform with our existing bylaws, which is why I supported and seconded Sarah's motion to amend our proposed budget, because it's a bylaw and we need to conform to that. We also just heard from our community, 84% of voting said that they want us to conform to the 7% dues increase, which is why I'm in favor of amending our proposed dues as a board and restructuring it in the way that it confines with the petition as stated.
Paula?
I guess I have a question as to why we are making a motion to amend to 7% rather to conform with the bylaw itself, which has a Part A and a Part B to it, which includes a special assessment, and why we're only talking about the 7% rather than the bylaw itself.
Larry?
Very good point. As I said, if we do not include a special assessment under this, we will be in violation of the RCWs. And I am sorry, but the RCWs do outrank the bylaws, as noted by our attorney in that document from which you quoted only a part. He said it would be not enforceable, although there is no case law that would be on our side. So it is still illegal, not pursuant to the RCWs, and state law and federal law have changed so-called contractual relationships in community associations for decades. We no longer can discriminate against people based on color or race or sex or financial status. We can no longer prohibit political signs. We can no longer prohibit flying the national flag. We have to make accommodations for peoples with disability, including accommodations for comfort animals, on and on and on. Law outranks the bylaws. The law is extremely clear. There is no doubt about it. Now, if the board wants to go to the ridiculous and expensive, a ridiculous and expensive effort of taking the numbers that are already there and manipulating them so that you wrap them in a bow, call them a banana, and stick $1 in a yellow box and $1 in a blue box, you're going to come up with exactly the same amount. It's pointless.
Lee?
I have a comment.
Okay, but I've been called on.
Okay, Sarah, you're next. Lee is speaking now.
Okay, I'm going to come at this in a very different kind of way. I've come to this party very late. It was sometime late in June that I accepted being a member of NNE, and then was named chair. And my biggest problem with this is that the people who put forward the petition knew when they presented it that they would have a conflict between the date that the petition was presented and the dates that the NNE and staff had to meet in order to meet bylaws. So my question to the president is, were attempts made and were members of this large community who had a lot of energy around getting the petition signed, did any of them come and volunteer to rework the budget? Or did they just demand that the work that had been done over a 6-month period be redone to meet their deadline?
I'll take that as a rhetorical question. Thank you.
Actually, it wasn't a rhetorical question. I mean, it was in the sense that I know the answer. But the amount of work that volunteers and staff did to ensure the election, and did it, although we were accused of any number of manipulations, none of which can be proven because they didn't exist. And now to try to hold hostage around something that they could have prevented and cooperated, and are just doing a kind of, as far as I'm concerned, it's a bullying and harassment tactic that ignores the amount of work that duly elected people, I'm not, but the others got more votes than other people, so you're duly elected. And the community, I think it's fabulous that the community got together. The community has done a number of really important things in the valley to make life better. The recreation thing was excellent. It was built on the fact that 15 years ago, it was volunteers who converted that whole area downstairs into a livable space from a rat hole. So I think volunteers are wonderful. I think we've done great things, including the community gardens. I don't have any problem with members rallying and taking a point. And the point may or may not be valid. I wasn't around for the money issues. But it requires mutual cooperation. And we have spent hours and hours and hours and hours. And someone said here, oh, you're not supposed to talk about the work. I'll be finished in a second. Oh, it's so much work. No, the problem isn't the work. The work is the harassment and bullying that went to volunteers. So I'm reluctant to make, at this late hour, and I don't have a vote, to make any concession around something that they knew full well 3 months ago was going to lead to a battle tonight.
Thank you. Sarah, you had a comment?
Yeah, I have several comments. First, regarding what Larry said, the attorney, and Andrew mentioned it too, the attorney also said that we would be likely precipitating a lawsuit by ignoring the bylaws. So if we're ignoring the RCW, and that's illegal, it's also illegal to ignore our bylaws, which is why the attorney said that could lead to a lawsuit. So that is a null point to my mind, because both issues are a problem. Regarding what was just said, we did try. We had a vote. that Leslie voted to make aye and vote down to amend the budget when this was presented, when we were going through the budget, to have a second option, should the SGM pass, and it go into the bylaws that we have a 7%. So yes, an attempt was made, and yes, we were willing to be part of that. We were shut down. There's been no cooperation. It is blatantly obvious, the difference in cooperation from staff and the board on this SGM versus last year's. So yes, there was an attempt made, and no, this wasn't ignored, that it was in the 11th hour. This is the second time we're going through this discussion. Also, when we voted on the budget, all we voted on was one sheet of paper that said a dues amount. There was no detailed information in there. That's very easy to change. All we have to do is change the dues amount, because that's the only thing we voted on. If you go back to our packet, when we voted on the budget, that's all there was. The board is, in essence, deciding to ignore what the community just voted on. I have no idea why that would be deemed as a good idea. I think it's wrong. I think the community does have a voice here, and it was shown, and it was shown very strongly. And there is an option here. We can send out another mailer with a second budget. The 29th, it was when it was voted. We have 3 more days to get it done. Excuses need to stop being made, and it needs to happen. Also, the budget could be rejected. If we had the same number of people vote the same way as we just did with this SGM, the budget would fail. And then the budget has to be amended. Whether anybody on the board likes it or not, the community does have a voice, and we've just shown that there is a small chance a budget could fail. And then we're stuck with not even the 7%. We're stuck with what the budget is now, and it will have to be amended. So I see no reason why it can't be amended to comply with this bylaw, be within the 7%, and adjust it with a spending plan or however we choose to use it, just like we would have to do if the budget failed next year after November, after the AGM, when we go down that road. The reason we're only talking about this part is because there is no other special assessment in place. There's nothing else to talk about regarding a special assessment. So regarding Paula's question, we're not ignoring that part of the bylaw. There's no other special assessment. We're moving forward with the current special assessment, the Parks one, that will be 11/11 next year. And we're talking about the regular dues and increasing them by only 7% as voted on by the members.
Comments?
Madam President Carroll?
Carol?
A couple of things. Actually, Sarah's correct. She a couple of times at one particular point actually asked if we would revise or do a second budget. And the conversation that centered around that was, well, what would you take out of the budget? Because this is not a vote about dues. This is a vote about the budget. You don't set the dues and then create a budget to fit the dues. You create a budget, and then you fix the dues to fund that budget. So several occasions we were asking those who wish to have a lower amount, what comes out? What do you wish to have removed? And I'd been happy to sit down with people, but I will tell you that I have spent the last 2 days trying to figure out, because I hear that people have voted, and I'm trying to figure out how we compromise or come to a resolution on this. It's true, if we lose this particular budget, we go back to a current year plan, and we have to create a spending plan to deal with that. And that's scary. We have employees whose wages are going to be affected. We have a lot of really important things that need to be done. So as much as I believe this law or bylaw is illegal based on what we're hearing from our attorney, I am willing to figure out a way to do this. Now, I passed out a couple of weeks ago at our last meeting some information that showed that the amounts that we're asking for would fall within the guidelines of the bylaw, assuming that part of the funding came from a special assessment. So I reworked that, and Joel has helped me do that, and I'm going to pass that out. And Sarah, I don't know if you can accept an email. I did not know you would not be here tonight, but I will pass it out to everyone so that you can see. We definitely fall well within the guidelines of what this particular bylaw is requesting. We have done our job based on what we felt the needs were, and we debated this for 3 months, and I feel we've done a lot of work. And I don't feel that it is worthy of now just slashing a budget. I would never do that without going through the full process once again, which is going to be, at the very minimum, several weeks, let alone several months. And I think you can then say we aren't going to have an AGM because there's no way we could be ready in time. But I'm going to pass this out, and then Sarah, are you able to accept an email? Because I think I can probably, do we have internet service here?
Sarah, did you hear?
Yeah, I can.
Can you get an email?
Yes.
All right.
Madam President Paula, are you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm done.
Carol is handing out the hard copies right now, and she will send you an email in just a minute.
Madam President,
Yes,
Paula is up next.
Paula?
Actually, I'm not sure how to do this procedurally, but I wonder if this conversation wouldn't be better with an amended proposal to discuss amending the budget to reflect the AGM bylaw itself rather than the 7%.
If you would choose to make an amendment to the motion, you may do that.
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that we amend the budget proposal to reflect the bylaw that was voted on and approved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Whitney is a second.
Paula, can you explain what the difference is between what I said and what you're saying? I'm not understanding.
The bylaw that passed has multiple portions to it. And when that was looked at in full, the numbers are almost, they're within $3 of each other. The bylaw itself allows for 7% increase over the dues from the previous year, and it allows for 15%, up to 15% of the gross budgeted amount for the current year.
Income.
The gross
Gross revenue,
income.
yeah.
Gross income. Now, the information that was put out on page 5 in the August views did not reflect the gross revenue of the association. I think it was closer to net, and it missed out on, I think it was just the dues proposal. So the numbers look a little bit different, but when they're properly calculated, we're not that far apart. In fact, we're $3 under what the bylaw that was passed and presented as reasonable and presented as doable. It is not maxing it out, which I've heard repeatedly that having this amount doesn't mean that you have to max it out. It is not maxed out. It's a number that represents what staff presented, what the finance committee looked at, what the board looked at, what we went over in town halls. So to me, looking at the actual bylaw that was presented makes a lot more sense than looking at a portion of the bylaw that you want to have conform. I think if it's reasonable, if the bylaw is reasonable, then the bylaw is reasonable. And I'd like to discuss that rather than a portion of it, because I think I would be willing to support putting it into the AGM. We may have to fight about this another day. We may have to fight about it another year, because the number that staff and everybody else comes up with doesn't match. That may happen in the future, but that's not where we're at this year. And I think if we can work together and we have a number that's together, that we should pull this together and try and put it into an area that the community can be happy with, and that staff and that the board can move forward with in the budget.
Okay.
So that's what I'd like to discuss.
Discussion now is on the proposed amendment to the motion. Please restrict your discussion to the amendment.
Madam President, Larry.
Yeah, I will just address that. I'd like to note for both the community and the board that a year ago, this board took a look at a long-term possible funding plan. Would not bind the board because that's not possible. But it very specifically stated in the Part B, or Part 2, whatever it was called, the option that the board chose said that this year we would be able to do with a 15% increase. And we heard no mass hostility from the community about that. As a matter of fact, it was long after that the issue of a petition came up. I'll talk about that in a bit. The major point is that the number that we have is exactly what we talked about last year, and it fits underneath the entire scope of this unlawful bylaw amendment.
Are you speaking in favor or opposed to the amendment?
I'm just pointing out some facts.
We're
I'm not
discussing
taking-
the amendment right now.
I understand
Okay.
that, and that is, those are facts that are necessary for evaluating the propriety of this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, all those...
I
in-
do.
Sarah?
Okay, so the issue with there is a big difference between what is shown and what the petition put together. The big difference from what Carol put together and from the petition is Carol is including non-dues revenue in the budgeted number. The petition itself was put together with budgeted revenue that's straight off the AGM ballot, which does not and historically has not included non-dues revenue. That obviously is a whole chunk of money that if you increase, adds to the base. It also adds to the amount the special assessment could be. So if you take a maximum of 7% on top of our regular dues, you get 135.75 or 135.85 would be the max that our dues could be, leaving the special assessment how it is. If you maxed out the special assessment, then it would be 140.52. Again, that would be creating a special assessment that today does not exist and would have to be voted on and gone through a process and deemed to be necessary, which we're not at today. So they are very different numbers. So I'm speaking against the amendment because it's not accurate.
Carol?
Yes, please.
I'm really not sure where to start, because I've talked to 5 different CPAs, and they all said, yes, gross revenue is gross revenue is gross revenue, and it's in our budget. If you look at the budget that's online, if you look at all of the paperwork that we have about this, if you look at the measure that is in our upcoming dues, all gross revenue is included. It's part of our budget. We could not run this organization without gross revenue, without all the revenue. And that includes the golf course, the marina, all of it. So I don't see anything in the dues that exclude, or in this bylaw measure that excludes a certain kind of revenue, a certain kind of gross revenue. It's all pretty much gross revenue. So the numbers that I put together are based on that. And so given this misunderstanding, I'm afraid I wouldn't be in favor of this. Much as I would love to move forward on this, the numbers just don't add up.
Sarah, did you get a copy of the spreadsheet that Carol sent?
No, I haven't had anything come through, no.
Okay, other,
Madam President, Paula?
Paula?
Sorry. Just to kind of back that up, in Part A of the bylaw, it is very specific that it limits the 7% to the annual dues and assessments for the association's preceding fiscal year. It's very clear that it's dues only. In B, it very specifically again states 15% of the budgeted gross revenues of the association. I mean, that seems very clear that it's the gross revenue of the association, not of a particular portion. A calls out annual dues, B doesn't address that at all, it's of the association, so it seems really clear to me what the wording what the actual wording of the bylaw is.
Can I comment on that?
Yes,
Madam President, we have someone before her. Michael.
She can comment.
I'm sorry.
Andrew was up.
Andrew?
Sarah.
Yes.
Well, Sarah can comment on that.
Andrew, can you speak into the microphone? Or did
Can
you
Sarah
ask?
comment on that note?
He deferred to Sarah.
Okay.
And then I'll
Okay,
raise my
Sarah.
hand to talk after her.
Use the mic, please.
Andrew deferred to Sarah.
Okay, my comment back to that is twofold. One, that's why the explanation was extremely important, and it's extremely frustrating it was removed, because the intent is gone without an explanation. Also, again, if you look at our 2019 AGM ballot, and you look at the total, it's called total gross budgeted revenue. So if total gross budgeted revenue isn't that, then our AGM ballot was wrong in the membership. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's literally, it was pulled straight off of the AGM material that every single member in this community voted on. And that is what it.
Further comment?
Madam President, Andrew.
Andrew?
I mean, I'm just a little bit upset because I feel like I'm being personally attacked as a board member that if we conform with the petition measure that it's somehow illegal or unlawful. And I'm not sure where that's coming from because nothing from our legal counsel has said that by doing so is unlawful or illegal. He says that the board has the power to adopt a budget and associated level of assessments that it deems to be in the best interest of the community association. And what I just heard on Saturday was that 84% of the community wants us to conform to the petition measure. He further says that if the board adopted a budget which exceeds the 7% limitation, which we would be doing so by not conforming, because remember I said earlier, when Larry, you mentioned that I wasn't including holistically what he had said, if the amendment did pass, then it is incorporated into the bylaws. So if the board adopted a budget which exceeds the 7% limitation, this would very likely be the factor in triggering a lawsuit that would allow the issue to get resolved in court. So nothing's actually illegal. It's also not unlawful. What he's saying is that there just isn't any case precedent for what we're deciding here. And as a board member, I just think we should stop all this nonsense and just go back to what the community is asking us to do, which is what he originally said, which is we can adopt a budget at the associated level in the best interest of the community. And we all just heard what the best interest is of the community.
Are you speaking in favor of the amendment or opposed?
If you didn't gather how I felt about that.
I
that
want to
would
make
be
it
a
very
yes.
clear. You speak in favor of the amendment? Okay.
Madam President, Larry.
Just noting that the only thing excluded in the language of the amendment is budgeted special assessment revenue. That is not included in the language that would relate to adding a 15% special assessment on top of the 7% increase for operational.
Conforming to the bylaw wouldn't
It would
encompass both?
conform to this new amendment, because that, it does not, the calculation that has been laid before us does not include income from special assessments. That's the only thing that this bylaw excludes from a calculation. It says gross revenue of the association for that fiscal year, excluding any budgeted special assessment revenues. And by the way, even if the calculation had been included, that was not included in the proposal that was voted on. That was explanatory material and has absolutely no bearing on how we interpret that language. And by the way, it wasn't included on the ballot. Whether right or wrong, it's not under consideration. And what is under consideration is what the language says. It says gross revenue, not including special assessment revenue. Okay, that's what has been proposed. I will address the issue of whether a court decision is the only way that we know what is or is not legal. The law speaks for itself. It is the law and is the final word unless and until an issue gets into litigation and gets before a court, and then we know that there is in fact a dispute. Until then, that dispute does not exist in the law. If a court reaches a final decision that changes what some people read the law as saying, then that does become the law. But unless and until there's litigation, the law is exactly what it says. And the only thing that the council said in that letter was basically, the law is pretty clear, but we're required to go ahead and put stuff in the bylaws, even though it's outlawed by state law. We're required to put it in there, but it's still outlawed.
Madam President Carroll.
I just wanted to answer or speak to one of the comments that was made earlier about the budgeted gross revenue for last year. My reading of the bylaw is that any special assessment is for budgeted gross revenue for the year in which you assess. And the numbers that you see before you are ones that Joel just updated per the current AGM measure for this year. So these are current numbers that actually brought the numbers down a little bit from what I had given you 2 weeks ago, but still clearly shows that we would be well within the numbers. And I have to agree about the explanation, whether there was an explanation or not. How it reads, the explanation doesn't go into the bylaws, it's how the bylaw reads. And I don't see how you could interpret it any other way, in my estimation.
Further comment? Anybody want to call the question?
Call the question.
Okay, with no objection. Those in favor of the amendment to the motion stating that...
Could you read the...
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, stating that to amend the budget to reflect the bylaw passed at the SGM. All those in favor?
Sorry, excuse me?
What?
As worded, that makes no sense to me.
The bylaw that passed at the SGM.
To reflect that,
To
but
reflect-
in what way?
The budget.
To amend the budget to reflect the bylaw that passed at the SGM.
That to me is so open-ended, I can't even possibly vote on
Did
that
anybody
question.
hear a different motion?
What I heard was that it would be amended to reflect both a 7% in operations and a special assessment for capital.
What about the original
Okay,
motion?
and that is the bylaw that passed at the SGM.
Well, no, the bylaw says nothing about operations and capital, really.
No, it doesn't. What it does,
But there's still an original motion on the table too.
Yes, but
we're at the amendment.
Andrew, original motion has been amended, so therefore the amendment...
Not yet, we're voting on it.
Well, we're voting on it, but the amendment vote comes before the original.
Right, I'm just making it clear.
Okay. Paula?
If I could just clarify, the only thing that the original
Microphone,
motion,
please.
Okay,
the original motion was to amend the budget proposal to reflect a 7% increase.
right.
The only thing that I changed in the amendment was to amend the budget proposal to reflect the bylaw as passed at the SGM, to bring it into which the bylaw states the 7 and the 15. We would have to discuss how those numbers would work. It was just to open the discussion to bring it into
Yeah. And
forming
that,
with the SGM instead of a 7%.
Okay, all right.
and that's what I wrote
That
down.
helps, but not a lot, because we still have to have what that means is we still have to have a full discussion again of what it is we're
That's right. If
going
this
to
passes,
propose.
we need a full discussion. So basically, we're voting on the amendment to the original motion to amend the budget to reflect the bylaws passed at the SGM, apparently the meaning being to take into account both a potential 70% dues increase in addition to a potential 15% special assessment. Is that clear enough, Carol?
I guess I'm not ready to vote because I think we don't have an agreement yet as to what the 15% is based on. And so I don't feel comfortable. I mean, I would say I probably wouldn't vote on it because I don't know what that means at this point. I thought that the numbers that we had calculated and that various others have calculated would be accepted, but it sounds like we don't have a meeting of the minds on this.
Actually, the way I am reading this is that this is a generic amendment, and if it passes, then we will discuss the underlying motion, which will be a discussion of the 7% increase and the 15% special assessment. Right now, we're not discussing the details, simply the concept of amending the underlying motion.
So if I understand it correctly, this proposal to amend the underlying motion allows the board to consider an additional special assessment, but does not do anything other than that.
Correct. It allows us to come into,
Microphone, please.
it allows us to consider the actual SGM as the basis for the discussion rather than just 7%.
Then I have a question. Going back to Andrew's motion sounds remarkably the same as that amended motion.
Did Andrew make a motion? I'm sorry, but I thought Sarah made, Andrew seconded the motion.
Sorry.
Sarah made the first motion, and then Paula amended it.
Right.
All right? Are we clear? We are now doing a top level. Shall we continue this discussion to adjust the budget?
Based on
Okay.
all of the
Ready? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not seeing Andrew at the end. Yes, 5. Okay.
And Sarah?
And Sarah?
No.
That was no. All those opposed? 1, 2, and Sarah, 3. 5 in favor, 3 opposed. The motion does pass. We now have an amended motion on the floor to discuss a budget which may include a 7% or less increase and a 15% or less increase in a special assessment. Comments? Eric?
So if I'm reading this spreadsheet correctly and the new bylaw correctly, and it looks like the same spreadsheet that we had when we adopted the budget.
Similar.
I'm sorry?
Similar.
Okay, but it has the same dollar amounts. It shows that even if or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and we discussed it, and I remember Sarah saying that, yes, thank you, Carol, for doing these numbers. It shows how generous the proposed bylaw is. And so I'm not sure, what I'm hearing is that we're not going to be figuring out how to remove any dollars from anything. We're just changing we're discussing semantics around the dues measure, the budget, I'm sorry. And if we do that, that's going to cost money sending out another ballot. I also believe that we need to restart the 30-day clock by rescinding the previous budget and starting over fresh, which would give us more than the 3 days to get the ballots into people's hands, if this did pass. And so I would keep that in mind, that we would have to rescind and then start over.
Matt?
Further, excuse me, let's just keep it down. This is a meeting of the board. This is not for the audience to express their opinion. Comments?
Madam President, Larry.
I would like to point out that by rescinding and recalculating the time, we would both be in violation of the RCWs and the bylaws. The bylaws are very specific. First Saturday in November, period. There's a timeline that goes along with that. The RCW has a timeline, very specific. Now, they don't say when our annual meeting has to be, but our bylaws do. So I am very confused why people are suggesting that we must violate the bylaws in order to follow the bylaws. That makes no stinking sense. It just is crazy, not to mention the extra money on top of it.
Eric?
So what I'm hearing then is that there is, at this point, zero legal way to amend or rescind and start over to fall within the law of the timeline. And if it's that simple, we're not talking about whether to obey or not a new bylaw. What we're talking about is it's just simply an impossible box to get out of as far as the timing goes. And so I don't see, oh, one other thing. If we were to vote to either rescind or amend a previous passed motion, it takes a 2/3 vote. It's not a simple majority.
Oh,
Madam President Paula, and then Andrew.
I have a question on the timing. I believe that I recently saw an email that went out that said that there is precedence for sending out an update. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that we had to recall everything and that we had to rescind and start all over, but there is precedent for sending out updated information that would be able to be considered by the community. Is that correct?
it's a little more complicated than that, because you wouldn't simply send out a new set of numbers. You would have to redo all of the supporting documents, because now you have changed the numbers that you are putting into SURF and roads, and that's funding the reserves, and you have to inform the membership what percentage it's funded and what the correct numbers. So it's not just sending out new numbers. It's a whole new submission of a budget. Okay. Who's next?
Madam President, Andrew.
Andrew?
Again, through the lens of a board member, I just feel like that's something that we ought to do. I feel like the 30-day calendar for revising our budget should start as of Monday when the new petition bylaw became in effect. I would make that motion.
Point of order, we already have a motion on the floor, and we're discussing it at the moment. So it's not appropriate to have a second motion on the floor at this time.
Yeah. Is that an amendment, or is that another motion?
So it would be an amendment to the existing motion, which would be to have what I just stated, that the calendar starts as of Monday when the new petition bylaw became in effect. So the 30 days would have started as of Monday for us to reconfigure our budget to align with the petition guidelines.
Did the secretary get that?
Budget conformed to guidance.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Paula, would you read the amendment, please?
Some amendment to have the calendar, to change the calendar, to have the calendar start on Monday, to have the budget conform to the guidelines.
Okay. Discussion on this amendment, please. Eric?
The 30-day clock is described and defined by the RCW, which is from 30 days of an adopted budget. And we did not adopt a budget on Monday.
Further comment?
Just to point out what I already said.
Okay. With no further comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor? One. All those opposed?
Sarah?
And the rest opposed. Sarah, what's your vote?
Opposed.
Opposed, okay. So the motion fails. We are back to the underlying amendment, or the underlying...
Original motion.
Right, the underlying.
Okay.
Right.
Could you...
Did we vote on the amended motion?
Yes, we voted on the First Amendment,
But not on the second amendment?
but, yeah, on the second one, we just failed.
I mean, the first
Yeah, right.
amendment.
The
Right, and the first one
underlying
did
motion
pass.
Yeah.
And that
is now back under
to-
discussion. Yeah.
to amend the budget to be, to reflect the bylaw that passed at the SGM, which is a limit of 7% on dues increase and a limit of 15% on special assessments. Can we speak to that now? Larry?
Absolutely opposed because it's completely pointless. The numbers, as pointed out on the document that we have now, the numbers as pointed out, similar to what we discussed a year ago. The numbers as proposed originally and published in the ballots that are now or will soon be going out. Certainly, the proposal...
They have been mailed.
Okay, so I am now reliably informed they have been mailed. And certainly, the numbers that are in the special views that certainly got into my mailbox either today or Saturday, or yesterday, sorry. All those numbers are exactly what this bylaw amendment would have resulted in anyway, only with different packaging. The bottom line is about, whatever the heck it is, it says here, $145, thereabouts, under $145. And I just, it makes no sense to me, any more than it does to violate the bylaws in order to follow the bylaws. It makes no sense whatsoever to repackage something that's already been discussed for months and voted on by the board. It's a waste of money, and people want us to be careful with their money. What the devil are we doing?
Madam President Whitney.
I'm sorry.
Whitney.
Okay, Whitney?
So first of all, I just want to say thank you to the community because as part of a similar event that happened a year and a half ago, I know how exciting it is to be part of something successful, and I want you to know that your voices were heard. I'm sure I'm not the only board member who has lost sleep the last couple of weeks because we are in a really tough spot. We're basically damned if we do and damned if we don't at this point. And none of us want to raise the dues. I think this is a good budget, and we have a responsibility as board members to take care of our facilities and our community. And if we are talking about a difference of being $3 under what the proposal is of the 7% and the 15%, I think we're in a good spot. I don't think we need to keep arguing over how we get to that spot. We're already at that spot. We're in a mutually agreed upon limit for the dues amount. I think we just have to move forward, and we have to come a meeting of the minds or whatever. I am so tired of the bickering and all of the heartache that this is causing all of us. If we go forward with the budget that we have, it's under the amount that was proposed and that the community at large voted on. That's our answer, bottom line. I don't think we have to continue arguing about the semantics and the verbiage and all of that, because we already have our answer, and it's not worth spending the money. I agree with Larry. to send out additional budget materials or ballot materials is probably upwards of $10,000 or $15,000 when we're talking about trying to save money. So that's my 2 cents.
Anything else?
I have a comment.
Sarah? Sarah? Okay.
Yeah, okay, so the numbers we're talking about are not in agreement. Obviously, I was part of this petition drive. I was the representative. I know in a lot of detail exactly what all of these numbers are trying to say. And I also know people signing that petition and voting were shown the explanation. And the explanation lays out very clearly how you get to these numbers. It also shows that in 2020, the maximum amount the dues could be would be $140.57. And that would only be if we added a $4.72 a month special assessment that currently doesn't exist today. Again, if you just increased it without adding another special assessment that hasn't even been discussed, it'd be $135.85. That's what people voted on, and the community does get a say. So hiding behind the whole, we have to do what's best for the association, the community is the association, and they do get a say. That's why we get to vote on the budget, and there's a chance it'll be voted down. So the fact that we're arguing over this, when if this community comes out just like they just did and they vote this budget down, we don't get any increase, not even the 7%. And then what? Then you say, oh, well, we as the board thought that it made sense because that's what the corporation needed. But guess what? Again, the community is that corporation, and they can override that. And they've spoken loud and clear, and the board is choosing to ignore that. 100% choosing to look the other way, and that needs to be noted.
Eric?
I'd like to, I'm puzzled. I don't remember voting on 135.85. I don't believe that we voted on any dollar amounts for this SGM. I voted on the measure itself. If people were told that it was 135.85 and they didn't actually read the ballot, I'm sorry. That's that would be in error, I guess. I am speaking against this reconfiguring the budget because it would simply be, as Whitney said, changing the semantics of the measure unnecessarily to conform with, as Larry said, a bylaw that does not agree with state law. And if we're going to start following bylaws that don't agree with state law, why aren't we following the bylaw about 60% of the vote to pass a budget? That's clear to me that state law supersedes bylaws. And we have clear present experience with that recently. So I would speak against this, and I do want to make it also clear that I like the idea of some kind of surety or reasonable limits on increases. This wasn't the way to do it.
Mike?
Madam President, Larry?
Yeah, several things. Pointing again to the document that we considered as a board last year, it said very explicitly that after a 15% raise between 2019 and 2020, the only thing that would be necessary is, oh my goodness, surprise, 7% increases. So why are we arguing about this stuff? If the community had not been grossly, fraudulently misled by just despicable rumors characterizing a document that the state requires us to calculate, coming up with, in 1 year, a number close to $400. If the community had not been misled by that number as supposedly being something that the board would do this year or next year or the year after that, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this petition, because the community has had well over a year to react to a Kiowa. And all of a sudden, after news articles, and I don't know what all went on Facebook because I can't stand that faux book anymore, spreading a lie. And truly, many of the people who spread it knew well it was a lie. Other people are just scared out of their minds that they're going to lose their homes. So if you want to talk about what people had in mind when they signed this petition, that also should go in. And if people don't believe that's true, just recall the number of white signs that very clearly were printed up saying, protect your home and your future from a $400 dues assessment. Well, that bloody well confirms the lie that this community suffered under.
Tone it down.
Madam President, we have Paula, and then, Madam President, we have Lee.
Okay, Paula?
Kind of don't know where to start now. But I'm going to start with the idea that the board is willingly ignoring the will of the community and not listening by reading the bylaw that was presented and considering working within it. I think that's a gross misrepresentation and a part of the reason that we have such a divide. I would second Whitney. I've lost sleep, as a lot of people have, but nobody up here is sitting up here going, how can we raise the dues? How can we put people out of their homes? And so characterizing that as just willful and not caring, that kind of bothers me. As for this portion of the petition, I agree it's a packaging. It is a packaging, and it would cost money. I don't know if it's 10,000. I actually don't know what that number is. But I do know that 85% of the people that voted asked for us to put it, to do it. I firmly believe at some point, this is probably going to end up challenged, because at some point we're going to need to go over this limit. We are, I mean, likely going to need to. Maybe not, maybe it's going to be perfect. But I suspect that someday it might. But this year, it doesn't have to be that way, because we do have a number that is close to what the bylaw says. What the intent was, what anything else, okay, we could argue about that all day, but when we read the bylaw and what is actionable and what is doable by the wording of the bylaw, we are that close. And I think it's not only what we have to do as a community and as leaders to how we manage our money, but I think that part of being responsible to the community and to the association is finding ways to build bridges. And I believe that this may be a way to build somewhat of that bridge. Put it in the packaging that they put forward. It is it is packaging, but if we can conform to that, who knows, maybe that is enough to go forward in the future. Looking at what I've looked at for projections, I don't know. I wasn't quite,
Sorry.
I've gone back and forth on this, and I just want to say as a board member, I've gone back and forth on this, because on one hand, I'm like, well, it's just spending money to go after, this is where we're all at. And on this hand, I'm like, well, but how can we bring the community together? I think we have a responsibility to do both when we can, and I believe this is a situation in which we can, and so I obviously support it. I put forward the motion, but I would ask people to consider, how do we start bridging the divide when we're this close already, instead of creating a larger hole?
Madam President, Lee.
Lee?
Thank you. I have a couple of different things to say. The first one is that I support what Eric said. And it reminded me that 10 years ago, when I was pretty active in Sudden Valley, we were highly desirous of setting it up so that the future boards would have to act in a certain way. That happened to be to raise the dues, okay? We had a problem where getting a $2 increase a month was almost as bad as the last 3 months have been in everybody's sleep quotient, et cetera. I don't have a problem with a limit. I do have a problem with the way this was managed. And I pointed out, I believe at that time, maybe not out loud, that there was no effective date. It's really quite simple. We agree that the effective date is for the 2020 budget. 2021, I'm sorry, 2021 budget. That we're happy to have taken the input, the community has spoken, the people who will spend 3 months working on a budget will have their parameters. The people who put together the information, the packaging, will have it correct, which takes a lot, as I am very aware of mistakes slipping in because people are racing, not just for 3 days, but for 30 days. It's not enough time to get information out that is different from what is currently in the mail. And so I think the solution, we've got the number that's close enough, and we make it, we're welcome the bylaw for 2021 and make every attempt to, can I make a motion? I'm a non-voting member.
I
It would be an
believe
amendment.
so.
It would be an amendment to the motion, yes.
Okay, so I would make a motion that we adopt as a board and agree to conform precisely to the bylaw as approved by 85% of the voters, and use that as not just significant, but like input for conforming to the process that is laid out in terms of doing the budget. And I think I can shorten it, but I'm
For
not
the
sure.
year 2021.
For the year of 2021.
I second that.
So if I'm to understand that, that would be an amendment to the motion on the floor to say that that motion on the floor takes place for the 2021 fiscal year.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so then we do have a second. All right, discussion on this amendment?
I have a comment.
Comment, Sarah?
The bylaws note how this works, and it's effective immediately.
Other
The
discussion?
board doesn't get to pick and choose when it takes effect.
It's a solution to a problem.
Other discussion?
Well, I think if it takes effective immediately, the budget has already been approved for 2020, so it got approved by the community after the budget had already been approved. So you can't do a retroactive, we approved this, so now we have to change the budget that's already been approved. It becomes immediate so that the next budget that comes up, which would be for 2021, would then conform to that, is how I would read that.
Madam President, I'm not sure that Lee was finished with her. She said she had a couple.
Oh, no, that's fine. If we move to the possibility of having a solution that meets the various criteria, then I hope my language was clear enough.
Madam President, we have Carol. I'm not sure she was speaking on the amendment.
I was speaking on another issue, so I will pass on this.
Then, Madam President, I call the question.
I would like to say something very short. I'm absolutely in support of this, despite my absolute firm belief that this bylaw amendment is not lawful. Nonetheless, I absolutely agree. We need to get beyond the nasty behavior of so many people here because of their fear and misunderstanding. I understand fear and misunderstanding creates anger and irrational behavior, but we have to get beyond those things. The numbers we have here are the numbers that we have been talking about for months. So let us do something good, and I'm in favor of this amendment.
Okay, discussion
Madam President,
to continue on the The amendment to conform for the 2021 budget, who's next?
Is Eric, Madam President, and then
Eric.
Paula.
Okay, Eric?
Could I have some clarification of this, this amendment and how it works in the underlying motion?
My understanding of the motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the motion now becomes to amend the budget to be reduced to a 7%, to conform to the bylaws for a 7% dues increase and a maximum 15% special assessment increase to be enacted for the 2021 budget.
Is that right?
My understanding. It's a little awkwardly worded because of.
Yeah, it's
But-
convoluted.
But I think, yeah, I mean, you worded it as it is.
Yeah.
As it is awkward, but I think that was accurate.
Okay, Paula?
Okay. I'm just looking for the wording in the actual bylaw. Thanks, Eric. I'm looking for effective immediately.
The effective date is spoken to in the bylaws.
Yeah, it's article, or Title 6, I forget which, it's 3 or something like that regarding amendments.
The bylaws do say immediate.
Yes.
Upon.
Yeah, we have it,
It would
right.
be upon certification, of
Okay,
course, but.
okay. So what you're saying is that and I get what you're saying. So upon it becomes immediately accessible or
Effective.
applicable and
Right.
effective for budgets that are developed beyond that. Okay. I think that's something that I can support only because the current budget already falls, the bottom line number already falls underneath what that number would be. So it seems like it's a way to say, yes, we have heard, we are honoring it, we are saying that we're going to take this forward in 2021. Again, I want to be very clear, the reason that I would be willing to support that and move forward with it is because I believe that the budget as presented already conforms to the SGM. If it did not already conform to the SGM, I would not be on board with voting for it, and I think that's something that we should all really take a close look at. I think this is a way that we can meet the intent of it, or the wording of it, and honor that, as well as committing to honoring to move forward with it. So for that, I would hope that the community would see the intent behind that. The intent is to honor it and to have heard it, and to say this is probably a really good way to move forward as a community honoring the SGM.
Just-
All right, the amendment on the floor right now is to add effective in 2021 to the underlying motion. That's what we're discussing right now. Shall we add this amendment to the motion? Who's next?
Andrew, Madam President.
Andrew?
And then me.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I got a little lost in all the amendments and everything. Did we ever actually go back to Sarah's original
That's the motion.
motion to amend our budget proposal so it reflects the 7%?
That's the
as of
motion, and that's still on
Monday,
the floor.
or whenever it became effective?
We
So
have
that's
already
still on
amended,
the table.
we've
We're-
already
we're-
amended that.
We're above that.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten
So
back
you'd
down
have
to
like,
it yet.
say no to all the amendments, and then we get back to the original motion.
Vote on the amendments, and then we're back to the original motion.
Okay, so my question though, to
He
further
said
my-
no,
Okay,
but
okay,
I,
let's listen to
So my-
Andrew's question.
So yes, absolutely, it should also be part of the 2021 budget. I agree with that all in spades, but then if that passes, what about the original motion?
Then the original motion is still on the floor, and it will be voted upon.
Okay, thank
it,
you.
with the original motion will have been changed so that it now states, if this passes, the original motion will state it's both 7% and 15%, and oh, by the way, it will take place in the 2021 year.
But that wasn't.
The 2021 budget.
Correct, that's not the original, but that's the whole point of making.
Point of information here, we did already amend the original motion.
Yeah.
I voted against it, Sarah voted against it, I think everyone else voted for it.
I voted against it.
Mike voted against it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we're saying the same
Okay,
thing.
all right, so now we are looking at the amendment, which will put a 2021 date on this motion, and is there anyone who would like to continue, to further speak to that amendment? Lee?
I just would like to make one clarification, and I would use the word "will be completely implemented" for the 2021 budget. Not, so it's effective today, or Saturday, it is effective, and the first time that we can reasonably implement the language as stated is for a year from now.
All right.
For the 2020.
That is a clarifying statement, thank you. Again, does anybody want to further comment?
Yes.
On this, Sarah?
Yes. I just want to point out, the bylaws again say it's effective immediately. We are doing a motion to follow our bylaw, which makes no sense. We already have to do this. We already should be doing this for 2020. What is being proposed in the budget is not in compliance with the bylaw that just passed. I'm not sure why that keeps being portrayed. I've told you very clearly exactly the intent and exactly the numbers, and it is not. We're not complying with it. The board is in the process of voting to not comply with it for 2020. We brought this up before, the board voted it down. Now we're bringing it up again in the 11th hour, yes, but in the 11th hour, and the board is choosing and voting on whether to comply with it immediately, like it is supposed to per the bylaws. This whole discussion and vote on effective in 2021 is ridiculous. It's already in the bylaws. That already is to be happening. And if the argument is, it doesn't matter, we can't do this, it's against the state law, then it shouldn't matter if it's 2020 or 2021 or 2022. That argument should hold. But now suddenly, apparently that argument is fine. In 2020, the state law doesn't matter that this isn't allowable or that it's illegal as been claimed in the comments. It's okay for 2021, but for 2020, no, it's illegal. I hope everyone is seeing the inconsistency here and the wool being pulled over eyes. It is not being complied with. It is not being implemented for 2020. It's already in the bylaws, and 2021 is irrelevant at this point. It will already be there and should be complied with regardless of the vote right now.
Madam President, Larry?
The only thing I would add to this conversation is that the underlying impact of what this amendment would do is to say, let us take some time out. Let us allow hot tempers to calm down and let people have a chance to think. If we need to visit litigation in order to clear this up, let's do it with a bit more calm and deliberate thought. It is quite correct that we have to follow the bylaw. But what we're saying by this amendment, I believe, and why I'm in favor of it, is time out. The difference between the numbers is about what, $9, $10 we're talking about?
No. This is what the dues petition would say, and this is what is.
Well, no, I'm trying to say what Director Holmstrom believes is a correct calculation is only about $9 or $10 away from what we're talking about anyway. That's my recollection of what I have heard in the last few minutes. And I really do not understand why we can't say, let us buy some time to calm down and think by using the numbers that have already been completely vetted.
Madam President Whitney.
Whitney?
Sarah, I have to disagree with you. I don't think we're trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, and I appreciate your passion for all of this. However, if the SGM just passed on Saturday, the budget has already been approved for 2020. So in hindsight, you can't say, well, now it's a bylaw, so now we're gonna go change the budget and redo all of the work that we've done. If the budget or the AGM was approved on Saturday, that means anything moving forward will apply to that AGM, and the next budget will be for 2021. That seems like that is just common sense. We're not trying to dupe anyone here. We're trying to simplify. We're letting the community know that we've heard them. We're willing to work with them. None of us want to raise the dues more than what everyone has already said that they want to, and the 2020 dues are very close to what that number would be. So that's all we're saying. We're not here to fool anyone.
It's still talking about this latest amendment to limit, to add the 2021 budget to this motion.
Just a quick addition, talking about delay, et cetera, and the dollar differences, pointing out the board has already, in this proposed budget, or the proposed budget, the only proposed budget that we have, has already adopted a salary freeze for almost all of the staff. We are asking people to give up what actually they deserve. And we have done that to try and soften the impact on the community. I think the board has done plenty already. Thank you.
Further
Madam
comments?
President, let's call the question.
All right. Is there any objection? Then we'll call the question on the amendment to add, and will be completely implemented for the 2021 budget. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sarah?
No.
Okay. 4 in favor. Opposed? 1, 2. 2 opposed. Abstaining? 3.
Plus Sarah.
Sarah. Yeah, oh, Sarah, 3, okay. 4-3, the motion carries.
Sarah, Carol, and
Eric.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's go back to the underlying motion, which is now, and I'm going to try to do this in a coherent manner. To amend the budget to reflect the increased limitations in the bylaw which passed at the SGM and will be completely implemented for the 2021 budget. That's what we now have on the table.
Which is the original motion by Sarah, seconded by Andrew.
As amended twice.
As amended twice. All right, now, discussion on that motion. Larry, then
Yeah,
Carol?
just point out that by voting in favor of that motion, that means we have nothing further to discuss on this issue at this time, because it's up to the next board to develop a new budget. And this board has done its work.
Carol, were you next?
I first want to applaud Whitney for her comments. I too am very happy to have heard from so many people their thoughts on this. And it's very, very difficult to be in a situation where we're trying to do the best we can. I have spent many hours trying to go through spreadsheets and reading the bylaw to understand it. I can't interpret it any differently than a number of other people have, and so I put my thoughts together in good faith, believing that we are well within the bylaw guidelines. And I do not believe that we should be making any adjustments this year because of the amount of time and effort and money that is involved in doing so, the time of our staff. Joel has already spent hours with me working through putting together this and pulling all of the data up to date. And I just don't see how an explanation that would be different than what the wording is I mean, 10 years from now, who's going to be here to explain that's not what was intended? You have to read the words, and if it's not clear and wasn't stated, I feel bad. I really do if people felt that there should be some other calculation for the special assessment. But given the information we have, I believe that the numbers that are put forth for this year's budget are already well within the guidelines, and that we'd be spinning our wheels and causing a lot of confusion to send out more. But I hear you. We all believe 7% is a very reasonable number, and we want to all get there. In fact, we believe 7% is more than we need to do in some future months, future years. So, you know, we have a number of things that need to get fixed, and once those are fixed, we should be able to do that with just cost of living in the future. But we've got to get there first, and, you know, we'll do it slowly. Anyway, I'm not in favor of making any adjustments at this point.
Madam President Andrew.
Just for my own edification, I heard 2021 again in what we're voting for now, but we just voted for that. So can we restate the motion, please?
Restate the motion to amend the budget to reflect the increased limitations in the bylaw passed at the SGM and will be completely implemented for the 2021 budget.
Well, we just voted on that.
2020.
No,
2021.
2021,
That's
yeah.
what they said. That's what they voted on.
Yeah, that is the motion as it stands now.
But we just voted on that.
You just voted on the amendment to add the phrase 2021. Now you have to go back and add it to the rest of the motion, which has been being put together piece by piece as we go through the meeting.
What was the previous motion that we just approved?
The previous motion, okay.
Was adding the 17% in.
Was the amendment
Was the amendment to make
to
it
make it
2021?
the year 2021?
No,
The one that was rejected was to rescind and start over.
But the last amended motion was to tack on the year 2021.
Can we have our secretary recite the
That
most
was-
recent motion, please, that passed? Thank
Okay,
you.
The one that.
the motion's in order.
why don't you just run through the history of
The one that
motions?
passed was for 2021, was to
The most
fully
recent one.
implement by
Okay.
2021. The one that did not pass was to rescind and start over. The one before that was to add was the first amendment, which was to amend to the special assessment, to conform with the special assessment.
Right, and
Which
then
was
the
an
original.
amendment to 7%.
Yeah. The original motion was by Sarah. The first amendment was by Paula. The second one was by you. And the third amendment was from Lee.
So the only two that passed were
Okay,
making sure that that what we're talking about is the whole bylaw amendment, which is 7 and 15. That was the first one that passed. The second one that passed was now that will be effective as of 2021.
That the amended, that the bylaw would come into effect in 2021. So the one that we now go back to is just the 7%.
I know, that's why I said it's awkwardly worded because it says amend the proposed budget, but what it's really saying is amend the proposed budget for 2021 so that it comports with this.
I'm getting confused.
So on the
Okay.
table,
on the table is the underlying motion with two amendments, which my notes show to be amend the budget to reflect the increased limitations in the bylaws that were passed at the SGM and will be completely implemented for a 2021 budget.
Question?
Is there any further comments?
I don't have that wording? I think, is that what's confusing?
It's not that wording. It is, and I just left out the 7% and 15%. Just that there are the increase limitations. There are limitations to the amount that can be increased, and that's what.
The limitations to
We have
the
the same.
increase.
Yeah, right. The concept is the same with, I think, fewer words.
Okay.
Sarah?
No comments further.
Okay. Anybody?
Madam President.
Lee?
My question is, would you be good enough to say what a yes vote is and what a no
Okay.
vote is?
A vote in favor
A yes.
will amend the budget to be reduced to reflect the increase specified by the bylaws passed at the SGM and will be completely implemented for the 2021 budget. A no vote means we will not amend the budget, we will leave the budget as it is.
And a further clarification, because of the 2021, a yes vote means that the 2020 budget remains as it is. So,
That's what I said, a no vote means the 2020 budget will remain as it is.
in either case,
Both of them do.
in either case, 2020 will remain. What we're really talking about is the implementation, full implementation, so that we're giving guidance to the next board.
All right, I think we're talking at cross purposes right now, because to my
That's why I
mind,
say the language is a little awkward.
right, to my mind, if you don't want to amend the budget, which is what this motion says, you mean leave the budget as it is. If you don't amend it, you leave it as it is.
If it is not clear, then I must
Right,
move to further amend to make it more clear. It is certainly clear.
more
in-
words will not help.
It's not more words, it's changing a word. That word amend is causing some
Can we have
confusion.
Can we call a 5-minute recess with the parties who are responsible for getting the language?
Madam President, if I may, when you read the second part, the second amendment, you added the word "and," which means that, which sounds as though that the budget that is on the table, the budget that we have already adopted, has to be amended, but that next year, the SGM bylaw will come into full focus by adding that "and."
Okay, all right, we have been asked for a 5-minute recess. Let's do that and be back at 20 to 8. Let our brains rest for just a little bit. Okay, we have had our little rest. Now let's come on back and get back to business. All right, I'm going to start by saying that we have been winding ourselves up in words for the last hour and a half. And I'd like to back it all out, because the sense of what we seem to have been coming to is that this year's budget will remain at the same amount. We will not be changing the budget itself. Therefore, I would like to, if anybody would like to vote against it, vote down the motion, the convoluted motion that is on the floor, and simply state that the board will implement the limitations that are in the bylaw for the 2021 budget. And then we mail a letter to everybody explaining that this budget does conform to the limitations that were put out in the bylaw as far as including limits on dues and on special assessments. So, how would you like to proceed like that, or would you like to do something else?
I have a comment about that. We absolutely should not send out a letter, because that's not true. It does not conform. You can't just mess with regular dues and special assessments and say, overall, the number meets it, even though it doesn't meet it overall. That letter is absolutely unacceptable. should be sending out any letters saying anything like that to the community unless we all agree on something like that.
Discussion.
My only comment is a decision to do anything by the board is done by vote, and votes are determined by majority.
Further comment? Would anybody like to
Well,
call the question at this point?
I'll try and restate the impact as I best understand it. And if that's not what was intended by the person who actually made the last amendment, then I'll stand corrected. But this is the way I understand it. The motion says, awkwardly, that we'll amend the budget, but it doesn't say which budget. It just says amend the budget. And then it says to comport with the entire new bylaw amendment. And then it says, and to be effective in 2021. Okay, so as I understand the impact of that, the budget that was mailed out stays into effect, and we tell next year's board, this is what we think you ought to do. That we strongly believe, I mean, it doesn't need any extra wording, but it's basically a strong recommendation that you not exceed the limits in the bylaw proposal, although I believe they could legally do that. I mean, but that's the point. The point is that we're telling them, don't. Even though they might think they could, we're telling them, don't. If you vote against all of this, then what happens is we just go right back to what was mailed out, period, end of discussion. No recommendation to next year's board whatsoever.
Comments? Paula?
A yes vote for either one of those amends the budget.
Yes,
Or
there's
way
no,
that
there's only one
Well,
motion.
well, the way that but it amends.
No, it's already been amended.
The
we're talking about budget being amended,
Okay.
Well, you see,
budget being,
See,
about the,
this
okay,
is the
sorry,
confusion.
the budget being amended. A vote yes says we're amending the budget, whether it's, the first one was 7%, then it was within the bylaws. So a vote, yeah, I think that's what Leslie, you were getting at is, if we vote yes, then we are amending, then we are voting in some way or another to amend.
but not this year's budget.
Wait.
Because the end of the motion now says to be fully implemented in 2021. So we're actually voting to amend a budget that hasn't yet been created.
Is the confusing word here
That's right.
amend?
That's right.
Yes, you're using it in two different.
Give me an amendment. Give me an amendment to change the word amend.
Right.
And so I personally would prefer if we deleted that word, but that requires more amendment.
Give me an amendment. What do
Yada,
you,
yada, yada.
what do you want to do?
Well, personally, I'd say to make the language clear, let's delete.
Give me an amendment to make the language clear.
I move to delete the word amend amend the budget.
The 2020 budget.
Make the motion that everything that's there now is scrapped so that we can make a clear motion as to what we're trying to say.
That
So
doesn't
it
need-
needs to start over.
That doesn't need a new, I mean, his comment is a separate comment on the whole thing.
Okay.
What I hear him saying is, vote no, and let's start over.
That's an option.
I like that option.
Is there a, and I promise we will start over. We won't just vote no, all right? Is anybody objecting to calling the question at this point? Hearing none?
I'll object to calling the question because of lack of clarity.
Okay. There is only one objection to calling the question, and therefore we will call.
Then the
Eric?
comment, I would request the director to describe the lack of clarity so that somebody might be able to address that lack of clarity. Otherwise, then we just go on talking, but there's nobody else that wants to talk. So I would ask the director to state what is unclear.
Okay. What we have here is amend the budget. And then we go on to describe things that have nothing to do with the budget, such as in the 2021 budget, fully implementing the bylaw. So if that's what we want to do, we need to get rid of this concept of amending this year's budget. And we may do that by either adding more words, subtracting words, or whatever, or by starting over with a motion that states just what we want to say, which is we will fully implement the bylaw in the 2021 budget.
And I would simply ask if that answer clarifies the situation to the director who asked the question.
Okay, is there any issue?
When do we get back to the original motion for the 2020 budget?
It's already been amended.
There is no longer any motion for the 2020 budget. It's been amended already.
It's been amended with Lee's amended motion, and it was voted on and passed. So it's amended to that original motion.
However, there's,
So if we want to start over again, then we have to vote no to drop everything, and then we would start the conversation again.
Okay, if it's clear to every other board member, then carry on.
call the question.
Okay. So now we are back to
I just heard a call to question.
a vote
Am I allowed
on
to?
the original motion.
I would like to call the question on the most recent motion.
Okay, so hearing no objection now, to call the vote on the original motion, which has been amended a couple of times, to amend the budget, to reflect the bylaw and make that effective in 2021. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Opposed.
Sarah.
Okay. Okay. All those,
I think Andrew, you did.
Andrew, did you
I'm abstaining.
abstain? Okay, so we do have 7 opposed to the motion, and the motion fails. We now can start over again. Would anybody like to make the, Larry?
I'll try and make a motion. Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we implement for 2020 the current budget proposal that has gone in the mail and that has been stated, and that we act as a board to commit to implementation of the bylaw passed at the SGM for the 2021 budget.
Second.
Okay, we now have a motion on the table stating that the board moves to implement the current budget, which is in the mail now, and commit to implementing the bylaw for the 2021 budget. Larry?
I do have a problem with commit because no board can commit another board.
Recommend?
What we can do, I don't want to mess with changing it,
Okay.
but I just want the board to understand that next year's board, after the election in November, next year's board is a new board. They will do what they want to do. All we can actually do is say, we think you should.
Would you like to make a motion then that replaces the words commit to implement with recommend implementation?
All right, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I was trying to avoid it.
Is there a second? Second, okay. Discussion of the change? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll make an amendment to the motion, which is.
Okay, we already have one amendment on the floor that we need to discuss and vote on.
Well, she made a new motion.
She did, and then Larry amended it.
Yeah, I just did that.
Larry changed mine, and that.
But we can have another amendment, though. We just went
We
through one.
can't,
at like
we
five.
vote on them one at a time.
You have to vote on the amendment.
Yeah, it just goes one at a time. So if this amendment,
You can go too deep.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, if you're going to change my amendment, yes, you can do that. If you're going to actually modify the language that I just said.
Well, I would modify the language to
Okay.
state that we would adopt the petition with the 7% for the 2020 budget.
That's not an amendment to the amendment.
Yeah, that's not an amendment to mine. You're free to make
Okay.
that later.
Okay, well, I just feel like we're going around.
I
the bushes
understand.
here.
I understand.
Why don't we just like make the motion and see what happens, you know?
Okay.
I'm
We're
sorry.
just going around in circles here.
I believe actually that motion would be out of order because in order to redo a previously discussed and voted on motion, it can only be brought up again by prevailing voter.
Oh, that's true. In tonight's
In
meeting.
tonight's meeting.
You could only do that if, that can be done, but not raised by you. Somebody
Well, so you're-
else who
so this is
voted
why I
for it.
suggested having legal counsel here, because you're leading me astray here, because I asked originally, before we made those earlier motions, when are we getting back to the original motion that Sarah made, passed all the amendments, when are we getting back to the original motion? And you guys assured me that we would get back to the original motion.
We just voted it down.
We didn't vote on the original motion.
Yes, we
Yes,
did.
sir.
We did?
did.
Okay,
We
all
voted
right,
on
do I
the,
stand corrected?
we
Okay.
voted on the original motion as
And you
amended,
abstained.
and you abstained.
Well,
Everybody else voted it down.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, that's just, that's like, it's a time.
So what's on the table now is the amendment to replace the words "commit to implement" with "recommend implementation," which is all we can do apparently for next year's budget. Is there any discussion on replacing those words? Whitney?
I have a question, just as far as, I don't know if it is going to be along the lines of what I need to be saying, but I just have a question because aren't we recommending that they follow the bylaw that has been passed? That bylaw is going to be in effect, so wouldn't they have to follow that? Why do we have to make that part of our motion?
Okay, Larry?
As I said when I made the motion, next year's board might believe, and I think with good reason, but might believe that they don't have to abide by it because state law says so, supersedes it. What we're doing is giving our recommendation that they do it anyway. And we can do that.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Eric?
I really think that had the petition started about 6 months, 8 months earlier, we would have been developing the budget to conform with it.
That's way out of order, Eric, and you know that.
Okay. Any more comments on the wording?
On the amendment.
On the amendment?
Call the
And
question.
I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here. Whitney, I think that we're doing this to provide our support to another board to follow the bylaw. And we don't have to, but this is just our way of, saying, yeah, we think you should do it. So anyway, any further comments?
Call the question.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor. Those opposed?
Opposed.
1, 2, 3. 3 opposed. The motion passes. The motion on the floor is now to implement the current budget, which was sent to the members, and recommend implementation of the bylaws for the 2021 budget. Discussion. Paula?
I guess I just want to give a kind of I'm going to support this, and I'd like to publicly state that the reason that I'm supporting this is because in full good faith to the community and to the board and to the work that has already been done on this, I fully believe, after having read the measure, having gone through the budget with the supporting information that was provided, I fully in good faith believe that this is 100% going follows the bylaw as voted upon this weekend. And because of that, I am going to support this because I think it's the clearest way to move forward and to get past this. I would have had a hard time voting for it if we didn't also give our recommendation to the 2021 board, because I think it's important that we say, or that I say, that it has been heard and that we want to move forward in it, and that this is the best faith effort that we can really pull for right now for this, given the exact wording that is in the bylaw. So that's where my support lies for the way that this is being presented right now.
Other comments? Larry?
I'll just throw in a general thing. Part of the reason why I'm proposing this, even though I firmly believe what I believe and I've already stated about the law, because I want to make it very clear that I, for one, am not able to afford a $400 dues. I'm not able to afford a $300 dues. I can only afford a reasonable amount of dues. I'm on a fixed income, just like a lot of other people. I certainly remember the financial hardships that I went through in my 30s and 40s and 50s even, but certainly in my 30s and 40s. It was a nasty, tough time. And it's not my desire to put people through that. I will reiterate that I full well, as tired as I am of helping this community that has been so hostile to that help, I'm fully committed to implementing some mechanism that our lawyer will accept to help people who have a financial problem, because I believe we owe it to the community. And gosh knows, after a few years of 7% increases, I might be standing in line for that same assistance. So that's the purpose that I have for giving this kind of advice.
Any with no further comments?
Did Sarah?
Yes, I have.
Okay, Sarah, yes?
I just want to point out kind of the chain of events here. It was brought up when we went through the budget before to do a second option to implement a 7% limitation. That wasn't approved. It was also emailed the day after the SGM to call for an emergency meeting to begin this discussion so that we wouldn't run into this timeline. That didn't happen. The response was, we'll talk about it Thursday. And now here we are Thursday, and it's being told it's too late. We can't do anything. So the can has been kicked down the road with this, purposefully voted on by the board, and then pushed down to today, leaving with the situation that we don't have any choice, which again, I don't agree with. And this budget is very much not in line with our bylaws. I'm not sure how anyone could read the bylaw measures and say we're in line with it, because there's two parts. There's regular dues and there's special assessments, and you can't just mix and flip those and say, well, the total number's the same, because they're two very different things, and that's what the community voted on.
Further comments? Excuse me? All right, without objection. All those in favor of this motion, please say, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed?
Opposed.
1, 2, 3. 4 in favor and 3 opposed. Motion passes. Okay, any further discussion on the 2020 budget before we move on to the rest of the agenda?
Just so you
Carol.
know, I abstained.
Oh, okay, Carol abstained. All right, next on the agenda are announcements. Eric.
I want to announce that we have 2 candidate forums coming up in the next couple of weeks. One of them for Board of Director candidates. That's going to be on Wednesday, October 9th at 7 o'clock, right downstairs here in the multipurpose room. And on Sunday, October 13th at 2 o'clock, we're going to be having our county and state candidates forum here. So Liz Lovelet, running for Senate, and her Republican opponent will both be here. county executive, county councilman, and sheriff are going to be here. So these are
What-
people,
What's the date on that?
that is Sunday, October 13th.
Okay.
At 2 o'clock.
10:13 at 2 o'clock. May I add in there, I beg people from the community to go to that forum.
Okay.
Our county executive will be new, and we need to be extremely forceful and continuous in letting county officials know we demand more services from the county for the property taxes that we pay. We do not get services that other communities get, and we deserve it, despite the fact that we're a private corporation. To apply that, yes, it's the law, but it's also a ridiculous excuse that allows them to collect money from Sudden Valley and ignore us completely, despite the fact that we're 7,000 people, the fourth largest community in this county. And it's just abominable that we are unable to get any assistance. And now is the time, with a county council member being elected and a new executive, to start making the case.
Okay.
So please come, please.
I'm going to ask staff, well, upcoming, we do have Christmas with Santa and the craft fair, is that true? Are we having both of those events this year? Do we have dates on any?
We do, I don't know what they are off the top of my head.
Okay, all right, let's start advertising those soon, okay? Any more announcements?
A question on that, though. Are we doing a Halloween event again this year?
There's been a lot of discussion around that. Trunk or treating is going to happen.
Trunk or treat will?
Yes, through the rec center.
Okay. The weekend before Halloween?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, property owner comments. We're late already. Let's limit this to 15 minutes total and come on up and try to limit yourself from going too far. It's 10 after, we're good till 9:25.
Linda Bradley, 2782. You guys have been talking a lot about this consolidated budget, and what you have presented to the membership to vote on does not meet state law. Director Brown pointed out that you have to account for every expense and that you have to pay for that. Your consolidated budget doesn't do that. Your consolidated budget basically allows for $2,392,149 for operations. But operations expenses total $3,572,676. So that's not a balanced budget. You have failed to include $1,186,660 in revenues that you're required to record as part of the consolidated budget according to state law. It says that you will acknowledge all revenue sources much as all expenses. So I got some real concern about that, folks. I'll wait till I get my ballot because the rest of this, there's stuff that's in the views that's just upside down and you may have corrected it before the ballots went out. The other thing I'd like to ask about, according to the unofficial count, we had 2,000 votes altogether. On the report on page 25 that you have, on one line it says the total number of ballots counted was 1,994 ballots. On another line further down on the same page, it says total counted ballots, 2,067. And I'd like to know why numbers don't match. Thanks. And I just, you're worried about the 7% or whatever. I would worry about the fact that you can't just say that our consolidated budget is just our dues and assessment, unless that is our only revenue. If we have revenue from other sources, we're obligated to declare it.
Thank you.
It is.
Hi, Steffi Jones, 15 Cascade Lane. I fully agree with the previous comment. Thank you for that. I don't, when we're discussing the petition versus the budget, I don't agree that the numbers are the same. I emailed while I was sitting in the audience the spreadsheet that backs out the SGM that was previously passed for the Parks and Rec, because that is different. So I would hope that you guys will check your email and see those numbers, please. Also, it's irrelevant if you can figure out a budget or not. That's irrelevant. You can't use that as an excuse. You cannot say, well, that's going to take too much work because it's now a bylaw. So that goes into effect immediately according to our previous bylaws. So there aren't any room for excuses on that. Also, as Sarah had said, we did ask you guys to consider a second budget. We asked that early. And we did not create a conflict or bully or harass anyone by exercising our democratic rights to petition the community. I find that very offensive because I fully agree in our voting and democratic process. Let me see here. It is unfair to say that we did not do anything as the beginning of Lukoya. Larry, I feel that you have no idea what this community did when the law passed. We were very active, and it's insulting for you to assume that you know. We We did not know about the lobbying for the law. When the law passed, we got very involved. Our representatives stated that they heard from more people than they've ever heard from in Sudden Valley. This is hugely important to people. So this has been fought since day one. We have tried everything under the sun. We tried coming to you and asking you, please put some limits in place. And then you said, start a petition. So that's when we did that. I'm sorry that you would have liked us to do that last year. We're new at this. So, and we shouldn't have to be doing this. Our board should be supporting us, the community. 2,000 votes, whether it's 1194 or 2067, whatever it is, it's around 2,000 votes, and that's the most votes that have been cast. So that's a huge voice. Yeah, I guess that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, board. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I missed you. Yes. Thank you.
You're not chopped liver.
Name and address, please. Yes.
Chris Weitzel, 24 Summit Place, I believe. When the law first came out and it became clear what a hurdle this community was put under, where the budget passes if nobody even votes. Okay? That to me is undemocratic. That to me is unethical and immoral. All the rest of the words that I wrote down that I've forgotten now. But it was terrible. It shocked me. It shocked me. I saw a $12 million, 2 years ago, $12 million for a nice new place here. And I thought, well, shit, that's going to happen. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. Everything's going to happen. It's wrong because of a group of people in this building right now. The energies that you put in to get a historical turnout. Historical. 50 plus years that it's been. We've never seen the community get together like that. Keep up the good work, okay? Because if a board, a different board, a future board decides to do something that is not a need of this community, that is simply a want of this community, you have the power. You have shown that this community has the cohesiveness to get together and get behind something like no other group of people has ever done. You congratulate yourself. This board has gone through shit and hell and countless hours about everything else working on our community's behalf. Now, I obviously disagree and have had disagreements in the last couple days about certain things, but the point that I'm trying to make is they're doing the best that they can with what they've got. They gave you 2021. I didn't think they'd give you shit. You don't have to. Use a little emoji. So anyway, my point is really that we have come further with this compromise that we would have come if one won and one lost. We've shown that we can do it. Let's continue this. That was the whole point of the email. And you've done it. You're here. Thank you. You know, there was somebody, one of the people that's running for the board said, my home, I have my home, but Sudden Valley is my community. No, I live in a house, but Sudden Valley is my community and my home. And I could not have said it better. It's my home for 43 years. It's your home now. Let's continue to clean house, work on things, and work together. You know, we do not have to be as emotional. And that's why I think it's good to go ahead and time things, or just calm things down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Narcico, 15 Bramble Way. I tend to be a pragmatist. And one of the things that I was interested in, I guess some of the articles that I've written, and Larry's probably can throw a stone at me or two with regards to those kinds of things. My concern is like checks and balances and not having a runaway train. I mean, those things are important, having some predictability. I thought that was reasonable. And it sounds like a lot of that has been addressed. And from what I'm hearing, if I'm interpreting it correctly, the numbers that we're talking about, even if we stay with the budget that was proposed, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's pretty darn close to that 7%. So again, being a pragmatist, I said, that's the thing, that was the end for which all other things are a means. So that people have some predictability, some sort of sense. There's not a runaway train. It's not a blank check that not just this board, but any board. I mean, to me, that was a big concern. I felt that WUCIOA was a little bit over the top. I understand why there were some communities, and I've read about them, that actually they had to dig up the streets. They were so bad off. I mean, some communities it's gotten that bad. So, you know, there have been. So that's not as if some of the intent of that was totally unreasonable. But the reality was, it was really perceived by myself as well as a lot of other folks that we don't like a runaway train, don't like something that doesn't have checks and balances. I think, it's as Larry mentioned, even if for a moment that this law that is, or the amendment that was passed with the petition at the SGM, for a moment, even if it's considered not legal, but the idea that these are guidelines that we set up for so many things, from what color to paint your front door. I mean, a lot of things we present, that it's reasonable to have that. Even if legally it's not necessarily binding, it is a good sense. So I really appreciate that perspective, because we can do that. I mean, I was on the board for all those years, and you know, we can make things happen. And I think from what I heard tonight, if I'm understanding it correctly, those two items, one is the budget that's passed is within pretty darn close to what that 7% is and 15%. And for 2021, that again, we make a recommendation, and it might be legally binding, and we're all set there, but even if it isn't, you know, we can still live within it. So I think this could be a win-win. And I really like a lot of the things I've heard and a lot of different positions by all of you, really. So thank you all.
Thank you.
My name is Mike D'Angelo. I live at 438 Sudden Valley Drive, and I'd like to make two apologies. My first apology is to Miss Sharon Amen Wash. When she spoke at the podium, I am Sergeant of Arms. I'm supposed to make sure that I take care of everyone who speaks at the podium. There were some hecklers in the crowd. She's just about this tall. And they just about brought her to tears. And I sat over there, and my job is to make sure that she's safe, and I didn't do my job. I let the hecklers go on and heckle her so that she's probably afraid to come to a board meeting now. And so to her, I'd like to apologize. And my second one is to the board itself and to the rest of the community, because as Sergeant of Arms, I let another individual, Mr. Joe O'Keefe, run roughshod over us, going into a 7.5-minute tirade and giving the finger to us when we said his time was up, and then asking, what are we going to do, throw him out? So I didn't do my job again. I should have thrown him out. That would have been the right thing to do, but I did not do it, and I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there more comments? We have about 2 minutes left.
Okay, I'll be quick. Steffi Jones, 15 Cascade Lane. So if this is a compromise, I would appreciate the board calling it a compromise. That would be easier for the community. It's harder to get behind something when we're told that we're blatantly wrong on every facet. So just for your consideration, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you have 30 seconds.
Go 52 Louisview Drive. Yeah, there's been absolutely no gratitude from the board for, you guys have raised the dues, double the dues now, starting in 2021, from the time we've been here. And I don't see any gratitude. You all are taking in twice as much money now, and there's nothing but complaints. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move to board comments.
Yeah, I'd like to just put out a bit of information. I also happen to agree that Wakiowa is anti-democratic. It is, however, exactly the same process that we have operated under for passing budgets for decades. Most homeowners associations in the state use exactly the same process as we were forced to use. It was only by virtue of the fact that a court case came up that said, oh, the legislature wrote their law wrong. Sudden Valley can have a separate process and a separate vote on dues. Everybody, well, most everybody else in the state already did it that way. And every single condo always does it that way and has for decades. So it may be undemocratic, but the legislature was saying one rule for everybody. That's it.
Okay, any more board comments? Carol?
Well, I'm sorry that we sat and listened to some comments and then I was going to respond, but they left. But I will say to those who did remain, I do think this is a compromise. And that was my whole intent in putting together the information that I had, which I thought was accurate. I gave it to everyone 2 weeks ago and I never heard anything back. In fact, I felt it was confirmed that it was accurate. So I'm surprised tonight to hear that it's not, but I do feel that this was a compromise. And I hope, I'm going to ask everyone, I certainly will do my best, but I hope everyone will do everything they can to consider the impact of what we say and how we say it and what it does to our community as far as getting together and working together. I really do want to work together, and I was hoping that we'd have an opportunity to do that, but you know, I can't work in a vacuum, and I couldn't get any information about the information I was being given. I only saw it in a newspaper, and it didn't pencil. So that's why I presented it to the representative, and I never heard anything back. So I was assuming it was accepted. So, but I do think that that this is a good compromise that we've come up with, and I hope that the membership understands that we as a board also don't want to have outrageous dues. And in fact, I'm bringing another piece to the board tonight to consider of how we move forward and get a projection of what our dues might look like in 20 years, but we have to have better numbers than we have now. So, and with the 7%, you know, we'll use that as our guideline.
I'll just quickly say, if it wasn't clear from my comment on the last motion that we voted on, that was supposed to be a compromise on my part.
Okay, and as far as Linda's two comments about the budget and the NNE count, I believe that we need to look at both of those. We don't have answers tonight. Okay.
I think,
Anything else?
I'm sorry, Leslie. I believe when I'm on the agenda that I will go through those, and perhaps there was a misreading. I think they're accurate.
Yeah, okay, all right, we'll look at them later when we get to that on the agenda. Okay. Approval of consent agenda, minutes of the August 12th, 19 special board meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any objection?
By acclamation, please.
Approved by acclamation. General Manager's report.
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep this short. Just a few things. Over the last month, I had a meeting with staff to go over our preseason snow plan for this upcoming year. We're working on changing some of the SOPs, some of the processes that we're going to work on going forward in an effort to get the snow moved quicker than we did last year. Area Z, everybody should have gotten something in the mail from DOE, which is the final step for Area Z becoming delisted as a hazardous site. So we are, I don't know what year you started that, but it is finally coming to an end.
At least 20 years.
Okay. Wow. Not bad for the government. This month, 35 processes for ACC. There are alterations, trees, variance requests, and permit extensions. Right now, total projects, capitals right now are currently within budget. That is coming from Joel. We did 20 new member packages in September so far. And we just concluded an SGM with record number turnout. I will say I've never seen almost 68% of a community vote anywhere, anytime. So very good job on that. Okay. We're starting to scale down on our staff. It is that time of year, so we are starting to do a bunch of offboarding of our seasonal staff. If anybody has had a chance to look at Gate 5, we are almost completed with that park. That upgrade is almost complete. Also, I encourage everybody to go downstairs and look at the hallway. That is all the parks that we have, and it's a pretty good set of parks. So they're working on trying to improve all of those, but that is downstairs. I encourage everyone to go look at those, and if you have any questions on the parks, reach out to Maddie. The pools this year, $10,447. This is your first full year of operations with the pool. The goal was $4,900. With it being the first year, it was you were throwing some darts at the wall, and actually.
Well, double sounds pretty good.
It sounds very nice. So, but that is a good thing. It did get used a lot. Again, that is a Mother Nature thing. If it doesn't work, I mean, if it's rainy and crummy, that won't happen next year. Golf is the same thing. Golf is still 11% higher than the same period last year. Daily greens fees are still 21% ahead from prior years. And with the season starting to wind down, you're already starting to look for next year. So Brian and his team are starting to do all of their 2020 budgets for outings and getting things ready to go as far as that, rebookings, and trying to grab more outing sales. Year-to-date rainfall, believe it or not, is 5.44 inches below normal. I don't know while, but it seems very odd. The vehicle that was damaged by security is now back. We have it back.
Is that the one without a label on it?
Yes. Yes. The one door panel doesn't have a label. We're working on getting the labels on that. And we've had a few vandalism incidents out here. One in the cart storage area and another one at AMPM Beach where someone threw some lighted toilet paper. So, any questions?
Sorry about the pool incidents. I won't go into detail. It's too much information.
Anything? Okay, let's move on to number 8A, the 20-year dues planning project. Carol?
Yes, we don't have anything else to add. We have no funding requests, but I have to say one outcome of all of the SGM dialogue and voting and so forth, and this was long before the actual vote, but the conversation and so forth actually fell in line with conversations that we've been having at the Finance Committee about how we come up with a long-term plan for dues so that people can predict what the future will look like. And I think this ties in very well with the SGM because hopefully we'll be able to come together on that. But we've been working on this for a while, and I've had Penny Carter and Karen Borchert and myself, Joel. We've been going through everything in the reserve study to look at all the options there. And the Finance Committee several months ago said to start by taking all the major projects out and look at what the rest needs for funding. And then look at the special projects and really evaluate them before you actually come up with a plan. And so we've done that. And some of the things that we've set, as you can see, for our criteria or our assumptions are pretty much in line with the sort of things that we would typically need to do as far as making sure that we follow the requirements of our responsibilities as a Finance Committee and as a board. But what our hope is to come up with a 20-year plan, but we need some additional information. So one of the things I'm asking the board to approve tonight, and I will actually be making a motion, but I'm going to read the steps first. At first, we believe that staff should work with the Finance Committee to establish short and long-term funding percentages for the reserve study. So at this point, we don't know what is appropriate for our association. What should our long-term plan be for what amount of funding? And the end result is so that we have enough money in reserves at some point in time that we don't have to be faced with special assessments, that we're able to deal with somewhat larger projects without having to say, oh, well, we're going to have a special assessment. We also believe that staff should be directed to begin the process of gathering up-to-date costs and options to refurbish or replace the dance barn and to refurbish the clubhouse interior project. Now, let me explain what our thought process is on this. For instance, the dance barn. Do we repair it? Do we replace it? Or do we take it down? And we want to know what are the costs for all of those things so that we can come to the membership and say, here's what it would cost you to take it down. Here's what it would cost you to refurbish it. Here's what it would cost to build it new. What's your thought process? Yes, sir.
On that point,
yes.
Will that assessment also include the difference in the lifespan? If we refurbish a 50-year-old building, how many more years will we get out of it for that amount of dollars?
That's something that we would require of a study, is not only what would the lifespan be, but what is the utility of the building. So for instance, if you're to refurbish this, what will it do for protection against earthquake, for instance, or fire, those sorts of things. What would be the difference between refurbishing and installing something versus building new? And there are different requirements, but I'm not sure what they are yet. We have to find these out. And then those options should be put to the membership in our minds so that the membership has an opportunity to vote. And I was asked at the Finance Committee by a member, what would that input look like? That's not my expertise. I don't know. The board gets to decide how we gather the information. I know Whitney's very good at that sort of thing, so maybe she can provide some input. And then from the data that we collect and from the input that we receive from the membership, we would then be able to put a 20-year plan together that would give people an idea of what it would cost over a 20-year period. And our idea is that obviously some of the bigger projects would be have a funding option that would allow us to stretch it out over a long time. Somebody said, is it going to be a loan? I'm not even going to say that yet. We don't know what the number is. We don't know anything more than we just need more information right now.
One other question. I see mention of the marina parking lot and the marina spit. I presume that means the interior of the spit.
It's the inside, the tire issue, both the east and west.
Right. What to do with all those old tires.
Right, so that was, those are the ones that we took out, was that
The
whole
one
thing.
that is missing on this page, at least in my mind, is a determination of how much it's going to cost to dredge the harbor as it fills up to the point where boats can no longer get in and out, and when is that going to occur, and an estimate of what the county thinks it's likely to say, or the state is likely to say when we go and ask for permission to dredge that out. And the reason that I think that's incredibly important is I don't want to spend a penny on a parking lot if we're not going to have a marina. I don't want to spend a penny on much of anything down there if we're not going to be having a functioning marina anymore. Not to mention, how much is it going to cost to dredge, and is it actually worthwhile? Now, that's a bigger question than just how many years will it last, and how much money will we get from boat slip fees over that time period. It's also a question of, if we don't do it, what is the impact on property values throughout the community, and particularly those folks who live fairly close to the marina? I mean, it's a huge issue, but I cannot see, if we determine that it is not appropriate to rebuild the marina, then for all, please let us not spend any money on parking and all that other stuff that's down there.
Okay, if I may, we did not add dredging in, and here's the reason: it's not on the reserve study yet, because it isn't something that we have as an asset. It's not even our asset, but it is a cost that we would incur. So we can certainly, if the board agrees, add it as an additional piece of research item that needs to be included as part of the study to find out. Because this happened 3 years ago when we were looking at the revitalization. We had a scuba diver or something go in there and determine that it was probably okay for 5 years, but we should have it evaluated again. Now, I've heard from 2 members that already they're starting to scrape bottom. So maybe that's something that we, if the board wishes, we can add that in.
When you make a motion, I will make an amendment to that motion if you
Okay.
do not include it.
Okay. All right, so I will start with a motion, if I might. My motion is that the board approve that staff move forward on collecting the data per the 4 steps that I have placed on and just read to the group here, and begin the evaluation of those larger projects so that we can start to put a plan together and get input from the membership.
Second that motion. And I'll move to amend by adding into that list a full and thorough evaluation of the impacts of closing the marina versus dredging it out when it needs to be dredged, and figuring out when that might be. That will expand the scope of this quite, but since you've already got marina-related expenses down here, unless you're gonna take those off, I very much want to add in the big picture. So
Is there a
that's my
second for the
motion.
amendment?
Okay.
Okay, we have a second on the amendment. Discussion on the appropriateness of the,
I just would like to make a comment that in the upcoming election, we have two candidates that are opposed on the issue of motorboats on the lake, and we have one candidate that is talking about denying access to motorized boats on all of the lakes in Whatcom County, which would directly affect us to the tune of $120,000 a year. So that is something to consider when we're looking at our local elections, because that's happening in November.
further comments?
I think that was in favor of my motion.
Call the
Okay.
question.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment to add the marina? 2, 3, 4, 5. That is unanimous. Sarah, are you there? Sarah's gone,
Sarah
okay.
left us after the budget vote.
Right, okay, all right, then, of the voting members remaining, that is unanimous. All right, the motion continues with the addition of the marina items. Lee? No? Okay, anything?
Call the question.
All those in favor of the motion? Again, unanimous. Okay. Anything
Point
else?
forward. Okay, now, I'd like to be
Lee.
called on, because the next thing is committee reports, and I'm G, and I'd really like to be put to
Okay.
the top of that list so that I can leave all you good people.
Okay. All right, let's jump forward then to item number 9G, which is N&E, and you'll find those documents on pages 23 to 27.
And the primary one to talk about is on 25, and it's a kind of a spreadsheet. And it just goes through okay, let me back up. The election took place on Saturday, and the uncertified numbers were presented to the community. Then there's a certifying process that takes place, which we, meaning the N&E committee, the master counter, met and staff met to review the numbers. So basically, the top set of things, the 3203, that's how many were mailed out, ballots were mailed out, and you can see the number for foreign, so there are 133 members of our community who have a residence outside the country. Then the total number of ballots returned means either mailed in or dropped off, and that is the 2,037. So the N&E committee vetted each of those with staff, and just because there seems to be some confusion about the vetting process, those are sealed envelopes, the blue envelopes that are returned either by mail or put in the ballot box up to 4:30 on Friday before a general meeting. So there were 2,037. In the vetting process, there were 43 that were not allowed to go to the next step, meaning going to the counting of ballots. And that, the reasons are listed starting at the bottom, if you will, because the person who signed it is not an owner, there were multiple ballots, that's against the rules, it was undeliverable, there was no signature, it came in late, okay? So those are the numbers, that comes to the 43. And going back up to the top, that brings it down to the 1994. The issue came up of total number with dues not current. That's an irrelevant number. It's irrelevant because the only thing that people who are not current with their dues can vote on is the budget. and there was no budget in the SGM. Okay, so the total number then was the 1994. And there were 43 ballots not counted for those reasons. So we did not review any of the tallies from the master counter because no number was going to significantly change the outcome of the election. If the election is very close, then we're obliged to do a recount. That was not necessary. So that is my report.
Okay, questions?
Whitney.
I just have a quick question. So do these numbers agree with the numbers that were printed in the views, which the person that had made a comment? Okay.
I believe so because, yes.
Okay.
As far as I know. And if I'm illuminated else, otherwise I'll let you know, but
okay.
There was consistency across. We didn't have to do anything to reconcile numbers.
Okay.
Thank you.
But one of my questions has to do in that top section, total number of ballots that were mailed. You show the postage receipts for, it's 2,992 that were mailed out in the U.S., 133 foreign ones, and then there would be 3 handwritten ones that go to parliamentarian, secretary, and staff. That adds up to 3128, not 3203.
I can answer.
Please, thank you.
Those 3 that were sent out to the secretary, the parliamentarian, and staff, that's included in the number of domestic mailing.
Okay, well, I'm saying that the 3128 is a bit of a ways from the 3203, which is the total given at the top.
Leslie, where are you seeing that number?
If you look at page 26, that is the postage statement for U.S. first-class packages. If you look about in the middle, about a fourth of the way down, it says total pieces were $29.92. And if you look at the next page, it shows the foreign mailing, which is 133. And those 2 numbers, along with 3 that were hand sent, though they would not have been reflected on the postage, add up to 3128, not to the 3203 at the top.
Okay.
Is that right?
You're right.
Okay.
That seems to make sense because
Yeah.
it says
Is it
numbers
possible-
mailed as opposed to numbers delivered some way.
Well, how do we know if they're delivered or not? Well, all we know is how many got mailed out, and that's what we're tracking. How many were mailed out? And you can't deliver more than you mail out. Okay. I'd like to take a second look at this and perhaps bring back, this will in no way change the election. Let's just be very clear on that. But it is a good thing to have these numbers correctly accounted for.
Right.
So we'll bring that back at the next board meeting, all right?
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, other committees, starting with ACC. We don't have our ACC representative here tonight, but there are 2 sets of minutes that are posted online. Communications, that's also posted online. Is there additional?
As submitted.
As submitted. Document review,
There's nothing to
nothing
submit.
right now. Emergency preparedness, again, posted online as submitted. Finance committee, as submitted. Long range, minutes are posted as submitted. Go through this real quick. And final parks, trails, et cetera. Again, these minutes are posted online. If anybody's interested in looking at the reports from any of these committees, you can go online. All of the committees are there, and you can see what they've been doing. Continuing business and voting is necessary. Review of SVCA policies. Being 10 to 10, can we push this?
I'm perfectly happy doing
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Is there agreement on that?
Yes.
Okay. Moving to new business, ratification of executive committee, approval of 2 temporary NNE members. The minutes for the executive committee are posted on page 36. What would you like to say?
I move that the board ratify the executive committee action taken.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? We are unanimous, okay? We are down to property owner comments. Anybody got anything left to say? No? Okay, board comments? Yes, 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 okay, come on. Name and address.
Brian Copa, 2 Louise. And I just want to say, haven't been, and most of the community isn't angry at anyone personally on the board. And I personally appreciate the time that you spend volunteering. My problem is with the decisions. I disagree with just about every decision the majority board has made.
However.
And, you know, in terms of the way you've all looked at the community as not for the homeowners as being assets of the community. Can I just hold this? I feel really weird when I bend down. Pull that off there. Thanks. It's the fact that you don't look at the homeowners as the primary assets of this community is problematic. I think, and deeply flawed, right? And the fact that you are so focused on the structures and, you know, your fiduciary duty that you have for the structures is very, very problematic to so many of us. And I think the 84% that you see is not only a mandate on the petition, it's the mandate on your decisions. So I just want to stress that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. More comments? Board comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor? Okay, we are adjourned at 9:54. Thank you.